June 20th, 2023 meeting of the Amherst County Board of Supervisors to order. The time is 7 p.m. The first thing on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Board, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Motion on the floor by Mr. Ayers. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I vote aye. We will move on to the invocation and Pledge of Allegiance. The invocation will be led by Mr. Wade, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance by Ms. Tucker. So if you would, please rise.
All right, let's pray. Dear Lord, we come to you now and give thanks to you first and foremost for the day you provided us, Lord. We ask for your forgiveness for our sins, Lord. We ask your watchful guidance tonight as we take on the county's business, and we ask for your protection over our law enforcement, military personnel, and all citizens of Amherst County. Lord, just may everything we do bring honor and glory to you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we will move on to the citizen comment portion of our agenda. We have 4 people signed up. When you come up, if you would, state your name and your district of residence, and then you will have 3 minutes to address the board. The first person is Scott Payton. You come here, Mr. Payton, please. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Scott Payton. I'm a resident of Temperance District, specifically Indian Creek Road. I appreciate the opportunity to address this board. I'd like to offer my perspective on the legitimacy or appropriateness, if you will, of the Confederate statue that stands in front of the Amherst County Courthouse. It's been observed since the very formation of our country as a sovereign nation that the United States has never suffered the boots of an invading army. That, of course, being with the clear distinction of the War of 1812. But this statement is in stark contrast to the experience of the South's civilian population during the Civil War, or as my grandmother referred to it, the War of Northern Aggression. I've heard and I respect that there are those, possibly some here tonight, who are offended by the language that refers to the South's noble cause. I suspect that their grievance may be due to the belief that this noble cause refers to the preservation or perpetuation of the institution of slavery. I challenge that as a misinterpretation, with the reality being that the cause for which the Confederate soldier took up arms was to protect and defend their homes and families that were being devastated by the invasion of an army from the North. This truth is borne out by simply reading their archival letters home and their diaries. My research tells me that roughly 1/3 of all the battles in the Civil War were fought here on Virginia soil. Just think about that for a minute. None of what I say is to minimize the issue of slavery as a compelling and contributing factor for the Civil War, but what I'm speaking to is the cause for which the men in the South so bravely fought and died. This monument is intended to honor their sacrifice. Curiously enough, I just returned from a visit to the state of Maine, where practically every small town that I visited displayed a monument to honor and to memorialize their Civil War soldiers. Interestingly enough, these memorials prominently featured, or many of them did, featured a soldier in uniform. And most of those soldiers were cast in the very same northern foundries as the ones in the South. The only distinguishing feature being the displayed USA versus CSA. To the best of my knowledge, no one is clamoring to tear down or remove those statues. But the challenge before you is to devise and discover a resolution for the controversy that exists between people of differing opinions and sentiments. What to do? Well, if you feel compelled to do anything, there is a fair and reasonable path forward. It's premised on my strongly held belief that there's a compelling value and benefit to add to and not to subtract from. I suggest that you might consider to add a broader context to our public space that reflects the differing perspectives about this challenging period of time in our nation's history. After all, there was a not-so-civil war that was fought. But don't take anything away. This is an opportunity for expanded learning and understanding within our community. I say, tell it all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Payton.
Thank you, Mr. Payton.
Okay, next is Mr. Michael Esposito.
Michael Esposito, 140 Creighton Hill Lane, District 2. I was appointed by the Amherst County Board of Supervisors to be the chairman of the Amherst County Committee for the Sesquicentennial of the American Civil War from 2010 to 2015. Good evening. History is an interpretive discipline. We look through the dusty lens of the present in order to try to make some sense of the past. The only way we can do that is by making sure that we ground that interpretation with the artifacts that were left behind by the previous generations. The monument that stands at the courthouse is an example of one of these artifacts. It was built in 1922 using private funds and was located in the Amherst County courthouse courtyard. So why then and why there? Well, why then? We had just come back, of course, from a big victory in World War I, and we were honoring the young men who went over to France and participated in that victory. But we noticed, at least in the South, that there was another generation that was rapidly dying off whose service hadn't been recognized, from 60 years previously. And so why then? Because in 1920s, the South had finally recovered, and we had the funds for private citizens to be able to do something about it. And why the courthouse? Well, the courthouse was the natural gathering place for the militia, and that goes back to the colonial period. And it's in the period of the Civil War, it was the place where most of these men gathered and were mustered into their service. So we don't know the events of the future and how that's going to alter the interpretation of historians 50 or 100 years from now. But one thing that we do know for sure is that if we don't leave behind the artifacts as they are, the interpretation is necessarily going to be inaccurate, seriously flawed, and that's the first step to losing our history altogether. And we've seen examples of that. For example, in Russia in 1918, after the Communist Revolution, Lenin decided that most of Russian history didn't fit his narrative, and so he sought to destroy that. Similarly, in 1966, the Chinese leader, Mao Zedong, did the same thing under the guise of what he called the Cultural Revolution. As you can see, we've lost a lot of history as a consequence of that. In order to prevent that from happening in Amherst County, we should leave the monument alone. We shouldn't alter it or deface it in any way in the name of political correctness, because that view of political correctness is going to change over time. We shouldn't move it in order to placate one group of citizens because we're just going to antagonize another. It was put at the courthouse because it is the context in which those men were brought into the service that we're trying to honor. If we create this culture of division, all we're going to do is perpetuate conflict, and I don't think that contributes to the future of the county. Thank you very much for your time.
Hey, Mr. Mark Magruder.
Good evening, and thank you for allowing me to speak. I think I have some prepared statements, and I'll say them. But I want everybody to look at that flag over there, that one we all just pledged allegiance to. And that is the flag of this country. The Confederate monument at Amherst County Courthouse shows us the dominance of one people and culture over another. It needs to be taken down. I just visited Scotland earlier this year. The slave trade made some people very wealthy in Scotland and in Amherst County as well. Scotland's tour guides talk about how the horrible practice of slavery and its effects. Plaques are now on buildings being displayed, bringing this fact to light. At least the Scots are saying, yes, we did this and we are sorry for what we did to another people and culture. I did notice that some monuments in Scotland are defaced if the person depicted or the cause that they stood for fell out of favor with the people who live now. Some of these desecrated monuments are being taken down. Take down the Confederate monument. It does not serve us today or in the future. That's our flag, if I remember right.
Magruder, Ella Magruder.
Hi, Ella Magruder. I'm in the New Glasgow district, and so is Mark, he forgot to say. I wrote you all a very long letter, and I know that at least one person has read that, and I thank you for your reply. I first need to introduce myself, and I'm going to do it again, even though I did very much in the letter, just so that the people listening know who I am. My family has lived here probably from the French and Indian Wars straight through to now. And my great-grandfather, my mother's beloved grandfather, McGinnis, walked home barefoot from Appomattox. And it was a devastated world that he returned to. He survived the Crater Battle at Petersburg, and he lost his youngest brother, and his other brother was wounded. And I grew up with so many stories about the South. And I also had another great-great-grandfather, Tolliver Thompson, who fought for the Confederacy. All these people, as I said in my letter, were beloved. They were good men. My grandfather McGinnis actually paid for the first 2 black African-American teachers in Amherst County. He was beloved, but he did fight for a cause that I find abhorrent. And for that reason, I believe that the monument, which is so substantive and is the only one dedicated to anyone who served in a war in Amherst County, I believe that that monument should be taken down and replaced. And the reason I believe it should be taken down is because, first of all, there is no other monument in the county to the Revolutionary War. Many of us who've had family living here as long as mine have lost people in that, in the War of 1812, World War I, World War II, the Korean War, Vietnam, and the conflicts in the Middle East and Afghanistan. I understand everyone's very well-reasoned position that they don't want to erase history. That's true. But you have to understand that in 1922, that's exactly why this monument and all the others of such controversy were erected by the United Daughters of the Confederacy. They had a plan. And a number of members of my family were members of this and were part of the erection of statues celebrating their beloved ancestors. So it does pain me to take this position. But the UDC,
Ms. Magruder, if you
Yes.
could wrap it up, please.
okay, the UDC planned to erase and rewrite history. They put the argument of the War of Northern Aggression and states' rights into the United States, instead of the United States versus the traitors or the rebels. They erected statues for noble causes, celebrating chivalry and referring to slaves as servants. They rewrote the history books so that I studied that the slave owners were kindly and slaves didn't suffer, and they were benevolent. They changed the words of Reconstruction so that they said that the ignorant, stupid black people did not know how to govern. And so they left out of the history books what happened in Wilmington, North Carolina, where over
Ms.
300
Magruder,
people were
thank you.
killed.
Thank you.
Are you really going to cut me off right now?
You've
Okay.
already gone over a minute and a half, so yes, ma'am.
I just want to say for my dear aunts, great aunts, who made my christening dress, and I was christened at St. Mark's in Clifford, Virginia. That is exactly opposite of where the slave auction block was in front of my great-grandfather's store.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to address the board? If you could come forward and state your name and district, please.
I don't know if this is the appropriate time or not, but it has to do with one of the special exceptions.
We will have public hearings on that, and you'll have an opportunity to
Right,
speak at
that's-
that point. Yes, sir. Is there anyone else that would like to address the board? If not, we will move on in our agenda to our public hearings. The first item is a special exception request of Pamela Turner. Mr. Creasy?
Chairman Board, this request by Pamela Turner for a special exception in the A1 Agriculture Residential District. The purpose of this special exception is to allow a photography venue, special events place for weddings and other similar uses, and a short-term tourist rental of a dwelling. The property is located at 2770 Elan Road and is further identified as tax map number 121-A-22. The parcel is currently 17.6 acres. As I mentioned, it's zoned A1 with a single-family dwelling structure located on the property. There is a private water line that serves this property and extends down to the county's public water line, so they are on public water, and they're on private sewer. And this property is not in neither the designated growth boundary for water or sewer. The surrounding area in general has the same characteristics as the requested parcel. The property is a corner lot with Elan Road to the southwest and Ambrose Rucker Road to the northeast, as you can see above you. A single-family dwelling and agricultural farmland is to the east. The applicant is proposing to make use of 2 different locations on the parcel for special events that can be seen in your staff report. These areas would also be used for the photography venue. And the applicant is also preparing to build an 80 by 80 parking area as shown on the conceptual plan that is also found in the staff report to accommodate the special events. Within the staff report are requirements of a special exception. And there's also, in addition to that, there is information in regards to a low-volume commercial entrance. Been indicated by VDOT that this entrance currently on Elan Road will have to be upgraded to meet those standards, and that will be a condition set forth onto the applicant, and therefore no zoning permit will be issued until then. Staff has also been made aware by the applicant that they may plan to try to obtain an entrance from VDOT off of Ambrose Rucker towards the northwest side of the property. And as I mentioned, that will all be run through VDOT and also public safety for fire access, since the grade is slightly steep through there. In addition to that, there are 7 recommended conditions brought to you by Planning Commission. The first is in regards to lighting. All outdoor lighting will be glare shielded and directed so as to prevent illumination across the property lines. For sewage facilities, the applicant shall follow all regulations as prescribed by the Virginia Department of Health. Parking, guests shall be required to park on the property and not park on the neighboring lots or any right-of-ways outside of the property. For transportation, as I've already mentioned, all requirements from VDOT shall be met for the entrance, for the existing entrance and any new proposed entrance. The new proposed entrance would also have to meet low-volume commercial entrance requirements. Number 5, the owner shall meet all requirements set forth by the Director of Public Safety as it has to do with access to the property. Number 6, for traffic, a parking attendant shall be directing traffic with any events greater than 75 guests. And the last recommended condition ties it back to Section 916, short-term tourist rentals, and to make sure that the applicant meets all of those requirements. There's a recommended motion in the item summary. At this time, are there any questions for staff?
Thank you, Mr. Creasy.
Thank you.
Is there anyone here, is there someone here that is representing the petition? Mr. Kilgore, you're representing it? Okay, if you'd come forward.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I'm representing Mark and Pam Turner on the back row back there. I'm a real estate broker, been selling real estate in beautiful Amherst County for 40 years this year. And, you know, I think everybody has driven past the Dillard Mansion their whole life and kind of wondered what was there and you know, what the place looked like and all that stuff. And as I said in the Planning Commission meeting, these folks have a simple request. They're asking you to be able to share it with people and let other folks see the property, utilize the property, and enjoy the property. I can't think of a better location in Amherst County for something like this. It'll be something that the people will travel out of the area to utilize and spend their money here, which is what we're all looking for and hoping for. So the Turners are here if you have any questions for them, or if I can't answer. I think it's a pretty straightforward request, and we hope you look favorably upon it tonight.
All right, thank you, sir. If we have any questions, we'll call you back. Is there anyone present that would like to speak in favor of the petition? Mr. Marks, if you would state your name and district, please.
My name's John A. Marks, Jr. I live in District 5225 Clark Street, Madison Heights, Virginia. I noticed, and speaking in favor of this, that the Planning Commission voted unanimously to approve this. I see also it's a recommendation to the board, assumed by the staff, that they approve this. And I certainly think that's the proper way to go. I know the Turners quite well. Mr. and Ms. Turner are my neighbors on Ramsey Road, so I've known them for a long time, and I am convinced that they will make this an asset to Amherst County. Also, I tell you, I travel, and I know some of you do quite often, travel 130 quite often. It's a scenic highway, and you stop and think about the people that are going to be drawn to this venue. And as they come up 130, the things in Amherst County that they will pass and see, like, first off, the Wigwam, which was the home of Queen of Stovall, who was I'll say a famous Amherst County artist. They'll also pass several areas which were inspirations for Ms. Stovall's paintings. As you come on up the road, you know, today, as you drive up there, you'll see freshly cut wheat fields with hay fields with bales of hay, all scattered through it. A beautiful view. You will see as you move forward on beyond that, you know, there's there is a monument there, a roadside monument to Queen of Stovall in the corner of that property. So it's a lot of history that people will see as they come up 130. Then of course, after you come out of Elam and you get to you see all the fat cows grazing in the pasture, which is, which is always a very beautiful sight to see. But then I think as you come out of Elam and you go around the curve and you look at this venue backdropped against Tobacco Road Mountain, I mean, that's beautiful. So I think this situation is a win-win for the county, for Mr. and Ms. Turner, for everybody, and a win-win for the people that will be coming to that vineyard to be able to see the beauty of what's going on in Amherst County. So I would highly recommend that this board not only approve, but unanimously approve this request. Thank y'all.
Thank you, Mr. Marks. Is there anyone else that would like to speak in favor of the petition? Is there anyone that would like to speak in opposition to the petition? If you would come forward, state your name and district of residence.
Clarification, I'm not against the venue. I have a safety concern.
Okay.
My name is Danny Fields. I live at 231 Serenity Lane, Monroe, Virginia. And I'm not sure of the district number. Mr. Ayers is my supervisor. We live right around the corner from this property, and my concern goes back to the speed limit and the high traffic speed that goes through there. As you come out of Elam, the speed limit changes to 55 miles an hour. From the time that you hit 55 mile per hour until you come around the corner to where the entrance is to this property, it is approximately 4 seconds before you have a clear view once you come around the corner. Part of it's because the roadsides are not cut properly. There's a fence line that's all grown up, and it's dangerous. When you're coming eastbound, when you come around the corner and come by Ambrose Rucker, you have approximately 5 seconds coming eastbound before you have a clear view. Where we live, we have set up on the bank right above 130. A lot of people refer to it as the Albert House. Joe Albert built this home. While we've been living there, I'm outside walking my dog, or I'm outside between the 18-wheelers that go through east and westbound, the people passing on the double yellow line. This is continual. If you know where Serenity Lane is, it's like a cul-de-sac. You pull out on the 130. There's a double yellow line all the way through there. There's a hidden area on the other side. I've almost had head-on collisions, pulling out, making a right-hand turn because of people passing on the double yellow line, and it's done on a regular basis. I don't remember exactly how long, but in the last 3 to 4 years, there was a very bad accident right below there, almost diagonally across from our driveway, where an 18-wheeler, these chipper trucks in particular, and I know these guys work on time, but these chipper trucks come through there. I ride a motorcycle. I have come from the Glasgow Way coming in across the mountain. I've had my crew set right at 60 miles an hour. I've had these trucks blow by me and are out of sight. And it's not just the chipper trucks. I have counted as many as 12 18-wheelers in a row. They're coming around a blind curve when they come around there to Ambrose Rucker and the entrance to this property. So, and again, I think what they want to do with the property is a great idea. I have no problem with that at all. But something needs to be done about the speed limit, not just from Elam out. It needs to go a little bit farther. I would like to see that speed limit addressed. I have called the Amherst County Sheriff's Department about it. I've called the Virginia State Police about it, and I've called VDOT about it. They were wasted phone calls. There is very, very little law enforcement in the area. Serenity Lane cul-de-sac is a state road. I've never seen radar sit there, and it needs to be. If you know what I call them crotch rockets, you can hear them coming out of Elam, and when they go by, all you see is a blur. This is a safety concern because when you start having heavier traffic, whether they come out on Ambrose Rucker with a new entrance, which I think would be good, or where they come out, out with the new commercial entrance to be put in. The speed limit needs to be dropped down. I would like to see it drop to 45 mile per hour until you get at least a mile past, which will put it out of that blind dip as well, up to about where the old package shed is, I call it, right along in there. The speed limit needs to be lowered down. So that's my only concern and my only comments. And I spoke with Jim Thompson about this as well, and he said he's expressed these same concerns when the Dollar General went in and all. We actually have several speed limits in the area. We got a 35 coming down Cedar Gate. We got 40 in Elon. We got 25 when the school zone's open, and then we got 55. So I'd appreciate if y'all would get something done about it.
Thank you very much.
Thank y'all for your time.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak in opposition? Okay. If not, Mr. Kilgore, would you like to give a rebuttal to anything? Yes, if you would. Well, I have a few questions for you, and I'm sure the board might also. So and this might be for staff, but did VDOT look at this? Mr. Creasy, can you come up? Y'all can stand next to each other, I guess. So did VDOT have any concerns with sight distance or speed or?
Not in their initial review. They indicated to us they needed to get the total number of trips to determine type of entrance that'd be in place. We received that from the applicant, and that's based on their number. It's a low-volume commercial entrance. There will have to be work done to the existing entrance out there. However, VDOT never indicated that it could not be done, and the speed limit would not play a factor in that.
Okay. Let's go ahead and close the public hearing. Board, did you have any questions for either Mr. Kilgore or Mr. Creasy? No. One further question is, I know over 75 people, there'll be a parking attendant, but what is the maximum capacity of this venue?
Staff did not place a maximum on it. However, that is something that we can always place upon the condition. Based upon their parking, they're looking around 100 guests maximum per event.
Okay. So, no further questions? All right, thank you both very much. I guess in these instances, we depend heavily on VDOT to review any type of transportation issues, and we would take that into account because they are our traffic experts. Mr. Bryan, I would ask that you talk with them about the speed limit, but that's probably an issue that may be exacerbated by this, but in terms of being able to breathe new life into that property, I would have to err on being in support of this petition. Does anyone have any other comments or would like to make a motion?
Mr. Chairman, make a comment. Excuse me. Mr. Bryant, obviously there are some overgrowth problems in that area, and there's some embankments, especially going east from the entrance to this property. If we could see if VDOT could address those and maybe look at extending the reduced speed zone a little bit further east, especially since probably weekends for the most part, there would be a large number of traffic in and out of this property. If they could extend it, somewhat east would probably be good for that. That would be the only conditions that I see as far as, the residents' concerns. And Mark and Pam, thank you all for taking that piece of property and making something that we've known as a community all my life. Mr. Dillard did. He was a very successful man, and you all are continuing that by taking that property and changing it to an event venue to bring people into our community, and I thank you for that. And with that being said, I'll make the motion that the Board of Supervisors approve Special Exception 2023-193 with the Planning Commission's recommended conditions.
Thank you, Mr. Ayers. There's a motion on the floor by Mr. Ayers. Is there any discussion? If not, please cast your vote by signifying aye.
Aye.
I vote aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Thank you very much. All right, Mr. Creasy, special exception request of Susan and Samuetta Stone Lake. What? I can't, Samantha, I'm so sorry. I'm gonna get my glasses. I didn't bring them. Can I use yours?
Yeah, watch it. Just. Thank you, Tom.
You're welcome. Can I keep them?
Can't hear, I can hear, you can't see.
That's right. It is Samantha, and I've known you for years, yes. All right, I'm sorry, Mr. Creasy.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Chairman Board, this requested by Sonny and Samantha Stone Lake for a special exception in the A1 Agriculture Residential District. The purpose of the special exception is to allow a kennel. The property is located at 245 Old Farm Road and is further identified as tax map number 54-A-23. The parcel is roughly 15.4 acres large. It's, as I mentioned, zoned A1, and it has private water and private sewer and is not in the designated growth boundary for water or sewer. There's currently a single-family dwelling located on the property. The surrounding area in general, as before you, has the same characteristics as the requested parcel. The property is surrounded by agriculturally zoned property with single-family dwellings to the north, south, east, and west. The property also shares Gettys Mountain Road as a property line to the south. It's important to note that for the county, in regards to zoning, the definition of a kennel includes numerous things. It's any location where raising, grooming, caring for, or boarding of dogs, cats, or other small animals for commercial purposes is carried on, and so that's why this is considered a special exception. The applicants are proposing to breed/raise dogs. The proposal is not for grooming nor boarding of any animals, and the maximum number of dogs being kept on the property at any one time is 20. There are 5 recommended conditions. However, it's important to note that number 1 may not imply for quite some time. It's in regards to the entrance. Old Farm Road is a private road, therefore VDOT will have no arrangements in regards to the access to their driveway. And they indicated that the access onto Old Farm Road meets the required standard for the proposed use. Number 2, in regards to sewage, prior to the issuance of the zoning permit, the applicant shall contact VDH or DEQ to determine the septic system is adequate. Number 3, number of dogs. No more than 20 dogs shall be kept at the facility at any one time. Number 4 ties back to the county's ordinance in regards to noise. No animal shall howl, bark, whine, meow, or make other such noises that are plainly audible on the property of another person and which occur repeatedly or continuously for a period of 30 minutes or more in duration. And number 5, an inspection. The facility shall be inspected and approved by the Amherst County Animal Control and issued a certificate of compliance that is per the Amherst County Kennel Ordinance prior to issuance of any zoning permit. There's a recommended motion in your item summary. Are there any questions for staff?
Board? Now, if we do, we'll call you back. Thank you,
Thanks,
sir. Would you like to address the board, Ms. Stone? Board, do you have any questions for Ms. Stone? Okay. Is there anyone present that would like to speak in favor of the petition? Is there anyone that would like to speak in opposition to the petition? If not, the public hearing is closed. Mr. Bryant, is there another kennel in this area?
Yes, sir. There's one near on Gettys Mountain Road that's nearby.
Have we had any complaints on that?
No.
Okay, very good. All right. Is there any other discussion, board? So this is in my district. I think it would be good for the area. We haven't had any issues with the other one, so I would move that the Board of Supervisors approve special exception 2023-165 with the Planning Commission recommended conditions. There's a motion on the floor by myself. Is there any discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by stating aye.
Aye.
I vote aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Good luck with your project. Okay, next item on the agenda is the resolution for R. Waldron. Mr. Creasy.
Chairman Board, at your March 7th meeting of this year, the board instructed staff to begin the process of revoking Special Exception 2023-380. That is for Mr. Waldron. To jog your memory, this was a special exception request for a trucking business off of 29 Business going south. So to get your bearings, we've got Route 151 going towards Clifford right here, and so to be down south just a little bit, about half a mile. And in order to go through this resolution, per our county ordinance, you have to go through the such as a special exception process. This was taken to the Planning Commission at their May meeting, and they voted unanimously to recommend approval of Resolution 2023-7. However, staff's recommended motion for this resolution in this public hearing is that the Board of Supervisors table Resolution 2023-7 until their July 18th meeting. The applicant has made significant progress out there in regards to his entrance and planting of his street trees. The applicant has also indicated to staff that he has planted a few of his screening trees. However, it is not still in compliance with the site plan. However, he has informed staff that he plans to take care of this towards the beginning of July. We have received word from VDOT that the entrance does not meet their requirements. However, they have sent a letter to Mr. Waldron today, actually, in which he received, in which they will be working with him. His permit is still open until October for his entrance, and they'll hopefully be working with him at the beginning of July to get that corrected. So as of right now, the recommended motion is, of course, to table this due to these significant strides that Mr. Waldron has made in the past month. And staff hopes that he is able to follow through with his site plan and special exception conditions at the beginning of next month, and for you guys to make a vote on it at your July 18th meeting. Are there any questions for staff?
You said October was the VDOT permit is still open till then?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you very much. All right, Mr. Waldron, would you like to address the board?
Yes, sir. Good evening. I'm Timothy Waldron. When I started this project, there were several obstacles that I had to overcome. One, we started during the pandemic era. Hard to find anybody to do any work, especially when people was getting free money from the government. And two, trying to line up all of the necessary safety devices and, preliminary stuff to actually get the job done, especially shutting down a lane on 29 South, which seemed to be a challenge. Another issue was that during this particular time, I lost about 8 months because I had stage 2 cancer, which thank God I'm healed from that, as well as I went through a tumor, which took another 6 months. So, going through all of the illnesses and all of the, problems trying to get this project brought to completion, it was quite an extensive project. Everything total, the bids came in at $250,000. And, when you only have maybe 1 or 2 trucks running, it was kind of hard to, try to come up with that kind of money, and especially losing time for illnesses. So, but the good thing is that the driveway now is 3/4 of the way finished. We had Boxley out there about a month ago, and they'd done it, but they didn't do it according to the specs. And that's the reason why it didn't pass for VDOT. However, I do have another date for them. It's the second week of July, which hopefully will bring the paved driveway up to speculation and up to spec as to approved by the plan. And so, and then there was a question about the plants and the trees. All of those have been planted. However, when I go back and look at the blueprints, I think that they're not specifically placed in accordance with the blueprints, which means I'm going to have to go back and redo some of that. But I don't see that to be an issue. So I'm going to ask this board to, if you kindly would, table this motion. Give me an opportunity to finish it. I might add, I've been up and down 29 a lot. I drive a tractor and trailer. And we got the best looking driveway up there, guys. We really do. And if you guys go up and take a look for yourselves, we do have the best looking driveway up there. And I believe that it's going to be a compliment to Amherst County. And I believe that once we get this project brought to completion, that it will also be a tax, the taxes would be, brought up, and I think that they would be met, and I think it would be, good for Amherst. And, we don't have junk out there. We're not going to make the place look bad. And I just think that it would be something good for Amherst.
Thank you, Mr. Wallace.
Thank you.
Is there anyone present who'd like to speak in favor of the resolution? Is there anyone present who would like to speak in opposition to the resolution? If not, the public hearing is closed. Board, I will start. I brought this matter forward. Mr. Waldron, I think the point is that we passed a special exception to give you permission to use that property, and you had gone forward and started using it, but hadn't done any of the other things. If nothing else, we got your attention, and you have done significant work out there, and it's looking much better, and I thank you for that. I would request, I'm going to put a motion on the floor that we table this until October, when the VDOT permit closes. I would request that you not plant any of the landscaping until later in the fall, because it's going to die. And that's a waste of your money and time. So, Board, do you have any discussion on this?
No, I was going to recommend something similar to extending that deadline.
So I'd put a motion that we table this until our first meeting or second meeting in October, to give Mr. Waldron time to finish up. All right? Is there any discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I vote aye. Thank you, Mr. Waldron. I appreciate you. You have a good evening. Next thing on the agenda is ordinance 2023-4, mixed-use traditional neighborhood development. Mr. Creasy.
Board, this is a public hearing for ordinance 2023-4 for the mixed-use traditional neighborhood development district. To jog your memory, this is in regards to the Madison Heights area, the major development that you all approved a rezoning for back in the fall of last year. We had a first read with the Board of Supervisors at the beginning of this month, in which staff was instructed to look at a few things, one of which being the building size of individual commercial buildings as well as the mixed-use buildings, and then in regards to the setbacks for mixed or multifamily buildings such as your apartments and attached townhomes. The first, I'd like to go over the setback requirements for the multifamily buildings. We had proposed to change the ordinance to only creating a minimum of 15 feet. After speaking with the petitioner on this, he is okay with reverting back to the original ordinance. So now that there is no proposed change for this, and so therefore the required setback for single-family attached and multifamily dwellings will be a minimum of 6 feet in the neighborhood center and 10 feet in the neighborhood residential area, with a maximum setback of 15 feet. And that's the original code for the county. The second change that staff was directed to look into was the size of buildings. At your first read of this month, staff had proposed changing permitted uses of individual buildings to 40,000 square feet and multi-uses to 50,000. Staff has since changed that, and I would now like to read to you that ordinance change. So this would be for a by right permitted use. Individual commercial, service, or industrial buildings shall not exceed 20,000 square feet of gross floor area or 80,000 total square feet for mixed-use multi-tenant buildings. Mixed-use and multi-tenant buildings shall have a minimum square footage of 20,000 square feet per floor. So therefore, it cannot expand past that. There's also a second bullet point to this. Maximum floor plate for any commercial, service, or industrial use shall not exceed 20,000 square feet, though this limitation may be waived through a special use permit approval process upon determination that a larger building and design will not dominate the neighborhood or its streetscape. That last sentence gives you all and the Planning Commission ability to understand when a special exception comes to you all, what grounds to make that determination on. There was also one slightly other change from the first read, and that is for lots over 20,000 square feet. We have struck out the required setback for that. So it did read, except there shall be no maximum setback for any residential lot of 20,000 square feet or greater. And this is for your single-family detached, so standalone homes and two-family dwellings, duplexes. We have struck that out, so therefore they have to meet the maximum setback of 15 feet or 25 feet in residential neighborhoods. I know a few of the board members was not at our first read. However, within your packet, there is a breakdown of these code changes, and I'm more than happy to go over any of those with you all. But I'm not planning to go over them verbatim. This was developed through a workshop with Planning Commission in February, and of course brought to them for a public hearing, recommended approval on, and now is being brought before you. Are there any questions for staff at this time?
Board. Okay, thank you, Mr. Creasy. Is there anyone present that would like to speak in favor of the ordinance amendment? Hearing and seeing none, is there anyone present that would like to speak in opposition? Okay. I will say that I appreciate staff going back and listening to the concerns that were raised at the first read. I think you've done an excellent job. I think this will hopefully benefit that development and move it forward, and I'm looking forward to see it coming out the ground. We were talking earlier, and we'll possibly see some movement early this summer, and seeing buildings actually starting to be built, and that's very exciting for our county. Board, is there a recommended motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board adopt ordinance 2023-4 as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Ayers. Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I vote aye. Thank you, Mr. Creasy. Okay, the next portion of our agenda is the consent agenda. I will state that there are several items on here that pertain to public safety, but none of those pertain solely to Amherst Fire Department, where I am the chief. So I feel like I can vote impartially and objectively on these. Board, is there a motion for the consent agenda?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the consent agenda be approved as presented.
Any discussion? Motion on the floor by Mr. Ayers. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I vote aye. Consent agenda passes. We are on to old business, transfer station, Mr. Thacker.
Greetings. So 2 weeks ago, we had a meeting about the transfer station options. So what I'd like to do tonight is recap that briefly because we had two of you were absent. So I would like to go over this. So apologies to Mr. Martin and Mr. Wade. You were here, not here, Mr. Pugh and Mr. Ayers. This might be a recap for you, but I would like to go over it briefly. Shall I wait for Mr. Martin to return? Great. Here we go. So the three options to consider we talked about were operating as a transfer station, a modified convenience center, or close it entirely. So briefly, the pros of operating as a transfer station is $2.6 million that the county invested would be fully utilized. The citizens do love using it, and it does allow for full staffing capabilities. The cons, it is slightly more costly to operate. It's not truly used as a dedicated transfer station. It's kind of a hybrid, where it's not really a convenience center, it's not really a transfer station, it's a bit of both. And the building and adjoining roads sit atop a permitted future cell 3 of the landfill. Right now, the landfill is being used as cell 1. The board permitted cell 2 at a future date. There's also a cell 4, but cell 3 contains the new maintenance building and the new transfer station. So the question is, how do we pay for the personnel needed if we continue as the transfer station model? The rates here, and there's another presentation I'll go into briefly after this. Amherst has a standard rate of $53, which is below the average, And you'll see where it says residential hauling rate, we don't charge our haulers who haul residential trash anything. We're the only entity in the region that does that. We'll go into that a little bit later. We do have some of the lowest rates. The rates haven't been adjusted in 23 years. If the board does decide to change the rates, we can do that after 60 days. So some options to fund the personnel. You can remove the free commercial residential tipping rate. The rate I put on here was $50. That was just a wild number to use. It is below the $53 we currently have. That would generate recurring revenue of almost $342,000 a year. If we eliminate the commercial discount, commercial haulers do receive a $9 discount. That would do $149,000, almost $150,000. Most other localities do not include a commercial discount. Amherst County does. If we raise the commercial tipping rate from $44 to $50 a ton, that would create $78,000 of recurring revenue. Or if we increase the standard rate from 53 to the 55.50 average, that would bring in $32,500. Again, there has been no rate increase or adjustment since the year 2000. The scenario 2 is converting into a modified convenience center. It is a little less expensive than a transfer station. The citizens can still use the building which they like, and the passenger cars and trucks avoid the dangerous landfill phase. So the cons would be foregoing the DEQ permit that took 2 years to acquire, the loss of interchangeability with staffing, requires retrofitting the building because it's currently used as a transfer station. We'd have to make it into a convenience center. It would require one full-time landfill employee to spend at least half a day on site. That's approximately $28,000 in personnel costs. So we'd still have to use a full-time landfill employee one half of the time at the site at approximately $28,000 a year. And there would be no commercial traffic allowed. So all the pictures on the bottom represent traffic that is allowed at the permitted transfer station that would be not permitted if it were to be converted into a convenience center. If the transfer station were closed entirely, if the facility were, it would be the least expensive. It does allow for a potential return of cell 3 as an active landfill cell, and it is the most operationally efficient. However, it's also the most dangerous. What you don't want typically are passenger vehicles on a landfill face with equipment that's over 100,000 pounds going back and forth and making visibility quite difficult. We'd also have to revert back to using roll-off containers, which is cumbersome and filthy, and it would waste the $2.6 million county investment into the transfer station. The last slide contains about how many 20-yard containers fit in a 53-foot trailer right now. So imagine one of our drivers, again, going half-time, a full-time landfill employee spending half of their time per day dumping 20 containers or dumping in a trailer. So the 20 containers in a day would just be astronomical time waster. But this gives you a visual of what it would be. Any questions before I move on?
Forward.
Okay. So this is the condensed version of the same thing that gives some updated figures. The board did advise staff to go back and look at some other figures and modify them. So we looked at the funding options. We met internally with Mr. Bryant, Ms. McBride, Mr. Lombardo, and others to talk about removing the free commercial tipping. What we decided on, well, there's a litany of figures you could use. What we centered on was $44 a ton. Because at $44 a ton, Amherst County is still the least expensive venue in Central Virginia. As of July 1st, Region 2000 raises their rates to $44.50. So at this point, at $44, Amherst is still the least expensive. That would still generate over $300,000 a year in recurring revenue. Now, just as a note, to fund 2 employees would be approximately $110,000. So while that does create about $190,000 of additional revenue, remember too, we having a cell and having an active landfill are required to contribute to a closure fund. The approximate cost of the closure fund, when cell 2 is opened and then eventually closed, would be $10 million. So think of this extra $200,000 a year feeding that account for the next 10 to 13 years. We could also increase the standard rate. from 53 to a $55 average. Again, that's the 32,500. It brings the tipping fees consistent within the region. And again, we have not had an increase since the year 2000. So the advantages to the rate adjustments, again, we talked about the $110,000. It certainly pays for those employees. It also eliminates the free disposal option for commercial residential haulers. So again, no other entity in the region offers such a discount. It is nice to have. When I started here 3.5 years ago, we only had one hauler in the county. We now have 4. So frankly, it's done what it's supposed to do. It's brought in outside haulers. We provided a service to our citizens, but the time may be here to eliminate that. It would bring the rates consistent within other landfills and other transfer stations in the region, and it allows a recurring source of funding for the closure fund. As I mentioned on the last slide, the estimated need is approximately $10 million when cell 2 is filled. Any questions? One more to go. So Mr. Martin did ask us to go into greater detail to find out what our what the haulers are charging in different areas. So Green for Life, when we contacted them, service both Amherst and Campbell counties. And Amherst is $16.50 a month. These are all for one container, service once a week for residential customers. And Campbell County is $25. Family Run Disposal charges both $20 in Amherst and Campbell counties and $25 in Bedford, Appomattox, and Nelson. Bay's Disposal charges $35 for one container in parts of Bedford County. Goggins charges $22.50 for Amherst, Campbell, and Bedford counties. And IDS charges $25 in Campbell and Appomattox. Waste Co., who Mr. Beasley, who presented at the last meeting, has now started, has not advertised their rates yet. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Thacker. Board, any discussion? Mr. Pugh?
What was that, about a $10 difference between GFI and Campbell County versus Amherst? Is that what the bill, one was 16, one was 25, roughly?
I believe so, yes, sir. I have all these papers, not the one I need. I think they call that Murphy's Law. Thank you. Your question again, please, Mr. Pugh?
From the numbers that you received, the largest entity that's, I think it's GFI.
Green for Life.
Okay, that's
Used to be County Waste, yes, sir.
Yeah, County Waste. They're the ones that provide the majority of the trash pickup in the county, is what I see.
Yes, sir.
So I was looking at the difference in those prices. It's roughly $9.
It is, but those are the advertised prices. That's with Public Works calling them, or we happen to know customers in those areas. So, say, in the Timberlake area, chances are it'll be cheaper to operate than, say, further out in Campbell County. So these rates change, chances are they change depending on how far away you get. I assume in Brookneal, it's going to be more expensive than it is in Timberlake.
Yeah, they may not even offer it. Well, I guess my point is, if we do look at reducing or getting rid of the free trash to the landfill, we're going to look at most likely a higher price for our citizens on their bills. I mean, that's what I get out of this. So if we do decide to go that route, the citizens of the county will expect most likely to pay a little bit higher of a rate on their trash pickup.
There is the potential for that, but in a free market like this where you have multiple competitors, you might see a temporary price increase and then a leveling off. Once the competitors get wind that one has raised their price, the others may in fact lower them.
So I'm kind of stuck on what to do as far as how we should go forward. You know, at one time I thought that it would be, we could mothball the facility and operate as we had in the past. A lot of places still operate like that, but I do see the advantages of not having to have residential people go up to the face of the landfill, worry about popping their tires, so forth and so on. I mean, it could still happen in the transfer bay with all of the trash that gets thrown onto the ground there, so it very well could still happen, but it is a cleaner process. Your trucks don't get muddy, so I guess the choice is, do we want to continue to operate this facility as a convenience center versus a transfer station?
Mr. Wade, any thoughts?
First off, thank you for putting this together. I think this was very beneficial to actually see the numbers, see the rates, see how everything comes together. It's on. So, for those listening on YouTube land, thank you. With that, I'm inclined to support remaining, keeping it the transfer station. I'm inclined to go with the $44 rate. But I think at the same time, we need to circle back to this after that rate's imposed. So if the citizens see a rate increase as a result, then we reevaluate at that time. So that's my 2 cents.
Mr. Tucker?
Yeah, I concur. The recommended motion is certainly something I can live with. I commend you all for doing your research. I had no idea that we hadn't raised our rates in, would you say, 20 years?
23 years, yes, ma'am.
23 years. A lot to be said for that. Yeah, I'm fine with going ahead and keeping the transfer station as it is.
Mr. Harris?
Mr. Chairman, my concern, and when it was brought to my attention by Mr. Bryant, is obviously we had not looked at it for 23 years as far as rates, but when commercial haulers had the ability to haul trash from other areas, obviously all of these companies, they provide services to other localities, and then other localities have been charging for some time for them to bring waste into their landfills. What was the deterrent for them to come bring a load of trash to come to ours when they were basically paying nothing to do that? So I think it's wise for us to protect our taxpayers in that aspect, that, you know, we be in line with what other jurisdictions, so that, you know, regardless of where you haulers take trash now, it's pretty much comparable rates in all the jurisdictions around here. So we weren't sitting there as charging them nothing and everyone else was. So, you know, the question is, did we, I'm not accusing any of them, but did we take waste that actually was not ours? So this will level the field out where that, you know, I feel like we will be getting the revenue just as other localities, and it won't challenge our taxpayers if we were, you know, they had been bringing trash that should have gone elsewhere. So that's my feeling, and I will support this.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. I have a few thoughts. I did go out and tour the landfill. Thank you for that. It was eye-opening. Before I went out there, I was bound, set, and determined that we were going to change it to convenience center, maybe because that was my idea. I don't know. But after seeing the way it actually operates, it really doesn't make sense to do that. I think that this was good staff work to come up with these options. The kind of the question I have, though, is if we move this motion tonight of maintaining the transfer station operation as is and hiring of 2 full-time staff positions, really the reason for moving forward with the rate adjustments is to fund those 2 positions and the other thing. So it's kind of like what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Because I don't think without the rate adjustments, we would necessarily be in the same position to hire the new staff people. So while I'm fine keeping it as it is, I don't think that, and I support the rate adjustments, I'm not sure I'm ready to say go ahead and hire those positions right now until we do the rate adjustment. The other part of that is, and this might be a question for Ms. McBride, is the other thing in your presentation, again, excellent staff work, excellent forward thinking on the closure cost with the new landfill, is can we go ahead when we do set the new rate fees and set aside whatever comes in excess of the or at least a portion of it in excess of what it costs for those 2 new employees, in a fund that's dedicated for closure costs.
But we already have a fund set up for that,
Okay.
and we would actually just
move it into
whatever is set to fund those positions. I would take the difference and put it over there at the end of the year. We would not allow it to trickle back into the operating budget. Would be my we would watch that and make sure that doesn't happen.
Okay. So, Mr. Bryant, what is your thought on that? You guys are doing excellent work down there. Again, I just think I'd be more comfortable not saying go out and hire the positions until we do the rate adjustments. Can we not do that until, when can we do the changes?
The first thing we have to do, what we've asked you to do is to direct us to prepare an ordinance, because
Sure.
our fees are built in our ordinance, which is actually something we're going to look at changing in the next budget process, is to actually have a fee rate sheet that's part of the budget process instead of the ordinance.
Sure.
Mr. Popovich's great idea. So what we're asking you to do tonight is to approve the recommended motion, which would then allow us to make adjustments to the ordinance where we would have to hold a public hearing. So what we're asking you for is direction to come back at our next meeting. We would advertise a public hearing. We would advertise the change to our ordinance, which would be a change to the fee structure. Mr. Popovich has also pointed out through working with Mr. Thacker a couple small ordinance changes to fix a few things that we would bring back to you with that as well. So to answer your question, we'd hold a public hearing, and then after that change takes place, then we can start collecting the fees. And then Ms. McBride, we would work with her and her staff to make sure that the money is coming in so we can hire it. And I guess your question is, how long should we wait?
Well, as long as we go ahead and, at whatever point, and adopt the new rates, I would be fine in saying, go ahead and hire the new 2 positions. But I'm not comfortable in saying, go ahead and hire the 2 new positions until we change the rates, right? So.
That makes sense.
To me, I would be fine moving that the board direct staff to implement a change to the standard rate to $55 a ton, and to draft an ordinance change that will allow the county to change the residential contract haulers a tipping fee of $44 per ton as of September 1st, 2023. Then, when you bring that to us as a public hearing, then put the motion in front of us to maintain the transfer station operation and hire the 2 new employees, because then we have the funding in place to do it. So is there any thoughts on that?
It makes perfect sense to me as far as not hiring them until you have the actual rate changes and the billing and everything goes out, so you have the money available.
So does anyone have any more thoughts on that?
Mr. Chairman, is there any way, since obviously with the tipping fees on the haulers will generate more revenue than is needed to offset the cost of these 2 personnel, there's been discussion here tonight, for that windfall revenue to go toward the closing of the sale, could make that part that, obviously, that money at the end of the year is to be transferred to that, so that it doesn't find its way to go back into, that is designated to go into that closure account.
That's exactly my thought, and I would hope that maybe in that ordinance changing the fees, that could be.
I can add that to the revenue policy and do a CAC.
Okay, however you can do
Then
that.
because we did we created a revenue policy.
Okay.
I guess I have a larger question too.
Yes, sir.
We've discussed this, but have we really discussed how we are going to go forward when we open the new cell? I don't think we've had a discussion on how that will be paid for.
The opening cell 2 will probably require some borrowing at some point. I don't foresee that you're going to have the cash to open it, but that's something that Public Works and I need to work together on, because if they have all this staff, they have the ability to do some of it themselves.
Okay.
Right?
And cell 2 is how many years?
Cell 2 is about 10 to 12.
Yeah, about 13 years tops at this rate.
Might be more once we start charging.
Could be
Could be.
more.
Yeah, might be less.
That's the unintended consequence of a raise. It may be that the volume dips, but then our landfill life increases.
Okay, well,
But
either
as it stands
way-
today, it's 13 years approximately for cell 2.
Either way, I mean, it's not going to be a lot each year, but I think it makes sense to start setting funding aside for either the opening of the new cell or closing the other one, because neither of which is free, right? So instead of just saying, oh, well, let's leave it to the future boards to figure out, at least we're planning for it a little bit. So that makes perfect sense to me. So with that, I would move that motion that we direct you to implement the change to the standard rate of $55 a ton and to draft an ordinance change that will allow the county to change the residential contract haulers a tipping fee of $44 per ton as of September 1st, 2023. And we're leaving the other part out for now. As a motion, any discussion on that? There's a motion on the floor. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I vote aye. Thank you, Mr. Thacker.
Thank you.
That's solid work. Appreciate you. All right, next thing on the agenda is the county administrator's report. Mr. Bryant.
Okay, first things first, I'd like to invite all of you to attend Mr. David Prophet's retirement reception this Friday from 2 to 4 p.m. Looking at you, Mr. Prophet. Mr. Prophet has served the county well since 1987. I hope you've seen the one-page letter that we've put out that akins it to many historical pastimes and across the world. But thank you, Mr. Prophet, for your service to the county, for all that you've done for Amherst. We are working on a commemorative resolution where we'll bring him back out of retirement to come be with us one night.
Absolutely.
But I wanted to thank him for his service. Okay. So the next item is for the Library Board of Trustees. We have 3 seats that are open. The terms of Mr. Rob Simpkins, District 1, Mr. Larry Langens, District 4, Mr. Stephen Whittam, District 5. Their terms expired June the 30th, 2023. Both Mr. Langens, Mr. Jordan, and Mrs. Giles applied for these 3 openings. So our recommended motion is for either you to appoint those 3 members that are seeking those seats, or 2, to direct staff to schedule interviews with the applicant, or 3, to direct staff to advertise the vacancy to identify additional interested persons.
Board, what's your pleasure?
Are any of them here and want to speak?
Oh, I'm
by
sorry.
chance? All right.
All right.
I'll make a motion to reappoint Mr. Langens and then appoint Mr. Jordan and Ms. Giles.
Any discussion? This motion on the floor by Mr. Wade. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I vote aye. All right, Mr. Bryant, you want to tell us about the Social Services Board?
Yes, sir. The next item is a bit different. It is the Social Services Board. However, the term of Mrs. Tony Overstreet will expire June the 30th of 2023. Staff advertised this vacancy in the Amherst New Era Progress on May the 11th with a closing date of June 14th. We received letters of interest from Mr. Todd Rhodes as well as Ms. Sherry Temple. Their letters are in your packet for your consideration. The recommended motion is to either appoint Mr. Rhodes to an at-large representative to the Social Services Board, or to appoint Mrs. Temple at that at-large representative, or you could direct staff to schedule interviews or re-advertise the vacancy. But again, in this case, we have 2 interested folks for 1 position.
2 interested for 1 position. Okay. Are either one of those here this evening? No? Okay. Board, what's your pleasure?
I'll make a motion to direct staff to schedule interviews with the
All right,
applicants.
very good.
It's 2 for 1, so.
All right, motion on the floor by Mr. Wade. All those, any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I vote aye. We will schedule interviews. Thank you. All right, we will move on to the county attorney's report. Mr. Popovich.
I have nothing to report, sir.
Thank you, sir. Moving on to liaison and committee reports, Emergency Services Council, Mr. Ayers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was not at the last meeting, so I'll ask Director Beam if there was anything discussed. I do know there was some conversation there, and I think we transferred some money tonight with the building at Manellis and Rescue. They've been doing some interior renovations and had to do some mold remediation and required additional funding, in which they've been to the Emergency Services Council to request with that financial assistance. So, Mr. Beam, was there anything at you all's last meeting that I could not attend?
No, sir, that was the big thing. The only other thing was that,
If you could come forward, please, Chief. Gotta make sure everybody can hear you.
I'm allowed. The only other thing was in part with that, they had mold in the station. They had filed a claim through insurance, which is covered in the county, and the county insurance had reimbursed about $9,000 for the initial part of the mold remediation. And then the funds that you all approved tonight were to help with some of the remodel that happened after that.
And there's gonna be a groundbreaking soon on the,
We're very hopeful, working with Tyler and his staff to get the final permits for the our fire training center. Really excited. We did our pre-construction walkthrough last week, and we're excited soon to get started. And we're hopeful maybe groundbreaking next week, but we'll keep you posted.
always
very
the
much.
planners, isn't it, Mr. Creasy? Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. All right, moving on to Parks and Recreation and Cultural Development. That would be me. Our Parks and Rec Board and staff continue to do wonderful and exciting things in the county. I believe there was a senior luncheon today that Mr. Ayers went and got his discount at, I believe. And
You'll get there, Mr. Martin.
I am getting closer every day. They are also doing several sports camps that are being very well attended. And one exciting thing, they are partnering with Girl Scouts to set up a passport system for our county parks. And there will be some plaques that you will go and you will etch that you've been there, and you'll learn about various different things with the outdoors. And you'll come back and you'll be able to turn it into Parks and Rec and actually get a patch. So it will encourage people to go and visit our county park. So that's very neat, and Mr. Nixon and the Girl Scouts, thank you for putting that together. So we will move on to the Agricultural Committee, Ms. Tucker.
And Mr. Chairman, I don't have anything to report.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Tucker. Mr. Pugh, Planning Commission?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We had a meeting on June 15th. We had two special exceptions come before us. One is a short-term tourist rental on Coolwell Road, which passed unanimously, as well as a special event request on Riverville Road, both passed unanimously. Also, a workshop has been scheduled to discuss the county utility scale solar ordinance, and that was it. It was a rather short meeting. So we will meet at the end of July to discuss the solar ordinance, and these others will be before us next month.
Thank you, Mr. Pugh. We will move on to our next round of citizen comment. Is there anyone that would like to address the board? Yes, ma'am. If you'd come forward, state your name and state your district, please.
Good evening, everyone, to the board. My name's Gloria Witt. I'm the president of NAACP and District 3. My goal tonight is to kind of clarify and correct the NAACP's perspective about addressing the monument, particularly comments provided during the June 6th meeting. Several speakers spoke about the monument honoring foot soldiers, and they were Amherst farm boys who owned no slaves. These details may be correct. Some commented that there were also black men who served in the Confederate Army, and that may also be true. However, the larger, more critical truth is that the states that seceded in 1860 and 1861 did so to protect and preserve forever an economic system that was solidly anchored in free labor. Regardless of what individual soldiers, why they joined the fight, the larger narrative is documented in the ordinances of succession and in the Confederate States Constitution. That document did not shy away from endorsing and protecting slavery. It was the cornerstone in which the Confederacy was built. The NAACP does not advocate for the destruction, removal, suppression, or censoring of history or theories about it. We are and have been advocating for teaching a more complete history in our public schools and our public spaces. Right now, American history, the good, the bad, and the ugly, especially African American history, in its fullness is not taught. And what is taught is under attack. The sheer fact that the speakers on the June 6 meeting would say that Africans are the blame for slavery is disrespectful and demonstrates an education failure. Let's be clear. Despite the claim made by one speaker, the work of eradicating discrimination is done. Really? You know it and we know it. It's not complete yet. The NAACP is a nonpartisan organization and anyone can join. We reject the left-wing agenda label any speaker uses to gaslight this issue. Any future references to the NAACP as extreme or a partisan organization are to be ignored. And yes, we are woke. Woke to the inequities in housing, employment, criminal justice, education, banking, and healthcare that exist in today's America. In 1860, the overall population in Amherst at the time was 13,742 citizens. 6,278 were enslaved, more than 45% of the population. The NAACP asked this board to address the monument because we feel it's a throwback to the era when institutionalized racism was a painful reality, especially to 45% of our citizens. Clearly, the noble cause on the plaque is not shared by all county residents and is offensive to many. We hold steady with our request for the board to address the monument anomaly. As our elected representatives charged with the responsibility of tending to the well-being of all county citizens, you must reject outside influences or threats and stay focused on what is important to Amherst County today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Witt. Is there anyone else that would like to address the board? Yes, ma'am. If you come forward and state your name and district, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Melody Fletcher, and I live in Madison Heights on Amelon Road. And I also would like to address some of the comments made regarding the NAACP at the last meeting. Excuse me. For the record, the NAACP is not in the business of removing monuments to make money to be relevant. That statement was both ignorant and somewhat insulting. The NAACP raises funds to support our defense fund on a national level, to address voter suppression laws that are at the heart of the democracy, which is very much in danger, and to address other discriminatory actions impacting marginalized groups. We also support educational initiatives, such as providing the largest college scholarship to an Amherst County High School graduate within our community. And we also engage as well in other local collaborations. The NAACP seeks to collaborate and cooperate, not to dictate. As the conversations continue, our local NAACP chapter shares with your objective of making Amherst County a perfect slice of Virginia. We simply ask that you address the issue of the anomaly of the monument. And we continue to hold steady with our request for the board to address this monument anomaly as our elected representatives charged with the responsibility of tending to the well-being of all county citizens. You must reject outside influences or threats and stay focused on what is important to Amherst County today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fletcher. Is there anyone else that would like to address the board? Hearing and seeing none, we will close the citizen comment portion and move on to matters from members of the Board of Supervisors. Mr. Pugh.
I have nothing.
Wade.
Nothing, sir.
Ms. Tucker.
I do, Mr. Chairman. I sent all board members and Mr. Bryant and our county attorney an email earlier today. Nelson County, as we all know, an officer was killed from the Wintergreen Force over the weekend. Because he is a member of a private police force, he does not get line of duty benefits. That happened when the officer was killed at Bridgewater College, and it's something that Nelson County seeks to address. They are in the process of drafting a resolution. They have talked to a number of legislators who are very interested in sponsoring that legislation, and it would equal the playing field between those private officers and officers that serve our localities. Amherst County would have a dog in that fight because we have Sweetbriar here, and so we would be in the same situation. And I ask that, Mr. Chairman, that you arrange to have this put on our future agenda in July.
I think we just did.
Huh?
We just did.
Okay, thank you.
Please, thank you. Is that it? Thank you, Mr. Tucker. Mr. Ayers?
I have nothing.
And I have nothing. Next item on our agenda is consideration of a closed session.
Mr. Chairman, a closed session pursuant to Section 2.2-3711A8 of the Code of Virginia 1950 is amended for the consultation with legal counsel employed or retained by Amherst County regarding a monument on county property.
Motion on the floor to go into closed session by Mr. Ayers. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I vote aye. We're in closed session. Is there a motion to come out of closed session?
So moved.
All right, motion on the floor by, I think Mr. Ayers beat you to it. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. I vote aye. We need a certification.
I move that the Amherst County Board of Supervisors certify by a recorded vote that, to the best of each board member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from the open meeting requirements of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act and identified in the motion authorized the closed session were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed session.
Mr. Pugh?
Aye.
Mr. Wade?
Aye.
Ms. Tucker?
Aye.
Mr. Ayers?
Aye.
And Mr. Martin votes aye. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So moved.
Stand adjourned.